Egypt people is very nice, and if the Egypt people take my advice, they will strike down the one-party state they fear. But that had better not happen here, 'cause we know that everything would fall apart if the city of Keene, New Hampshire starts to listen to the malcontents at Free Keene and kind of cut spending. 'Cause the government needs some expensive things, like the wasteful 34 West building and the boondoggle jail where we put hat wearers and other people who could be considered swearers. Freaking.com.
To locals, they are a routine sight, almost forgotten. But if you don't live here in Keene, New Hampshire, and if you learn what they're doing, it will have an impression on you. For pretty much every weekend, for I think about the last 30 years, they've been gathering to oppose warfare in Keene Central Square.
War is a lack of imagination.
Actually, you should be saying we're making more. War is making more enemies than friends.
War is harmful to children and other living things.
The demonstrators have mastered a technique that I'm a big fan of, and that is,
when you fight evil with evil, evil wins.
they refuse to congregate in just
Trust
one
me,
area.
shall.
They spread out around the circle so they can be seen from multiple angles. Now I'm standing here with Kevin from Keene, who's one of the demonstrators here. And how many times have you come out here? How many weekends?
Oh, certainly 40 times a year for 7, 8, 9 years, whatever it's been.
That's about 80% of weekends.
Pretty much, pretty much.
Yeah, I probably saw you last time I was here.
Could well be.
The would you say, I'm trying to figure out, has there ever been a weekend missed in the last 30 years?
Pardon?
Have you guys ever missed a weekend out here in the last 30 years, or have you made every single weekend?
It's not been 30 years, but it's...
Oh, I heard it was 30. Okay, is it
well,
less?
yeah, some people have been here on and off, depending on what war. I certainly go back to the Vietnam War. Was arrested by federal agents right over there at the old police station. U.S. Marshals for refusing induction during Vietnam. I was drafted in 1970, a year and a half out of high school, and by then the entire American population was pretty much fed up with that war. Walter Cronkite had said 2 years before, you know, that it was time to pull out, and the American people believed that. That's why LBJ resigned. We got Nixon, who did nothing but put another 25,000 servicemen on that wall, and hundreds of thousands others brutally wounded. And here we are again, you know, with all our money going to the corporatocracy and democracy going downhill, and people just watching Dancing with the Stars and getting ready for the Super Bowl, and people are dying, the world's running out of cheap oil, a stable climate. These things are not to be disputed, though the liars keep disputing them in an effort to continue this death game they're in. And so it's important to care. It's the more one pays attention, which is a patriotic thing to do, the more one realizes how the course that we're on cannot continue.
Do you have any concerns? For me, as a libertarian, obviously there's a difference between some anti-war people and some libertarians. And one of the things that bothers me, you know, when I go to anti-war protests, I see a lot of very dedicated and very sincere and helpful people who are fighting against the government's excessive spending on warfare. But what about the violence that the government does when it forces, you know, you and me to pay for welfare, or to force you and me to pay for immigration control and things like that?
War is harmful to children and other living things.
I think it's very important not to categorize people. I'm disgusted with, by and large, liberals who say they mean well but really don't contribute to any substantive historical appreciation of the trajectory that society is on, whether it's Western society or, you know. And when we were born, when I was born in 1950, there were 2.5 billion people on the planet, and most of them were rice farmers. Today, there's 6.7 billion, totally dependent, ever more so, on cheap, abundant fossil fuel, which is James Schlesinger, former head of the Defense Department. He has come out recently and said, you know, the peak oil folks are right, that the world is running out of cheap, abundant fossil fuel, which, you know, this whole capitalist economic model is totally dependent on that not being the case.
Again, depending on how we're defining capitalism, I just, when I hear talk like what you're saying, I find myself somewhat concerned that the next step is some government solution the taxpayers will be forced to underwrite. Are you advocating that kind of thing, or are you advocating voluntary solutions?
I totally believe in I'm very, very suspicious of any government that isn't of, by, and for the will of the majority. The idea of basic democracy is basically crucial. I don't know that it can work on a size of scale that includes 300 million brutally misinformed people.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I am totally for local people learning how to grow their food and cooperate and take care of those least fortunate amongst us, and you know, sharing community and homemade music. And we got such a long way to go, but there are huge realities coming down that mean that we need to go in that direction.
Well, Kevin, I appreciate your time and answering some kind of halfway tough questions.
Well, I mean,
and I especially
one of my pet peeves, which I'd love to point out, is virtually every day I walk or bike or drive past, out in West Keene, this monstrosity of ugly architecture underway right next to the Jonathan Daniels School.
You're talking about the jail?
I'm talking about, no, this middle school, which is going to cost amazing amounts of money. It will not be able to be heated. They're not going to heat it with wood, you know? What are they going to teach the kids there? Are they going to teach them cooperation and sharing and agricultural skills, which their lives depend on them learning right now? Where are these tax dollars going for that kind of thing? And that, you know, and this is a liberal town, it's a democratic town, it's a progressive town, at least it thinks it is. And this, you know, who's funding this thing, and how did it ever get through? You know, it's such an eyesore, such an eyesore.
Yeah,
looks like a McDonald's built on top of a Walmart, you know, and it's like just such a glaring example of how out of control
jail school
the thinking. Exactly.
All right, well, Kevin,
agree with you more.
Much appreciate your time.
Appreciate it.
Keene Central Square here, by the way, is also the place where you've seen many of those dramatic marijuana celebrations. Those tend to be not so dramatic and not so frequent in the wintertime.
This program is brought to you by freekeene.com.